Remember my early visits here. My first visit was on Swamiji's birthday. I've mentioned this before, when Swami Atmajnanananda was speaking. That was the one and only time I ever saw him. But I remember him very, very clearly. That was a very nice memory. And of course, so many memories of Swami Atmagyanananda. So, and going up to his room and getting prasad from him and everything. So it's a great joy for me to come to this center in particular. So thank you all for inviting me. Oh, good. Thank you. The topic is something that I worked on about 15 years ago. I had received a request. You know, we have some magazines in India, Purabuddha Bharata Vedanta Keshari, and every once in a while they need to fill up one of their issues, so they'll request some of us to write something. So I got a request to write on Leela Chintana. There's reflection on the divine play. So I thought about it and I wrote back, okay, can I make it a Leela Dhyana, meditation? So they said, fine. So I wrote that article and then I thought it would be a nice talk. So I've given it a few times, even at Bellarmut on Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. Yeah, because they always need one English speaker. So they'll have one talk in Bengali, one talk in Hindi, and one talk in English. So whenever they catch somebody from the West who's over there at that time, they'll request them. So I spoke on the topic that time. It's one of my favorite topics. You won't get much philosophy today, but it's a very nice devotional topic, very helpful, I think, for meditation. So this will be meditation and contemplation on the divine play, Leela. And of course, it'll focus on Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, although it's something that's applicable to any type of spiritual tradition. So let me start out with a little discussion on some of the main topics here. The first one, of course, is this idea of Leela. What do we mean by Leela? This is a term that Sri Ramakrishna uses over and over again, especially in the context of Nitya and Leela. I think in the English translation, this will come out mostly as the absolute and the relative. But the Leela has this other sense, of course, of play to it. So we'll see that there are different textures and different elements, components to this idea of Leela. One is that it's a type of pastime or play or sport that doesn't have the same type of reality to it, that we can have a reaction to things that take place in this world the way we do to watching a movie. That while we're watching it, it seems real. Afterwards, we leave, we know it's not real. So we get some sense that this is some divine play of the Lord. This is one of the meanings that we have. Then the Leela also has this idea of something very simple and easy. The Leela, we have this term in Sanskrit, there's something almost spontaneously. And the last is that it has the sense of something not entirely real. In Vedanta, of course, we have this concept of Maya. And the Maya has a little bit of negative baggage to it. The Leela takes the place of Maya with a positive spin. So this is why Sri Ramakrishna will say, why call this world unreal? If it's a manifestation of the divine, then we can say it's also divine. So it is a corresponding term. From a devotional point of view, we can say a replacement term for Maya that gives us some devotional spin to it. Who did that? Thank you. Yeah, okay. So, something not entirely real and yet not unreal, not real in this materialistic sense. Something that has a little bit of an element of, I don't want to say joking to it, but that we don't have to take it too seriously. So these are all the different aspects that we find that it helps us understand this idea of the transcending and the immanent, that God is not simply something beyond everything. There's the infinite absolute Brahman, but involvement in the world This world is a manifestation of the divine. The divine is playing. We even have, of course, the Upanishadic idea that it's Brahman alone who is manifesting as each and every individual. So in sport, so there's, it takes the edge off of things a little bit. So Sri Ramakrishna was very fond of this idea. When we read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, we'll find that he doesn't like to call the world unreal. He'll say anitya. Anitya is another way of saying it is transitory, that it's going to pass. It's like a show. So that falls within this realm of Leela. There are different types of Leela. And Sri Ramakrishna talks about this, how God sports in the world. And the one that he liked in particular was sporting in the world in human form. There were two different incidents that took place in Sri Ramakrishna's life when, because his mind was so merged in some divine ecstasy, some state where he was unaware of the world, that he fell. There are two times that we know of in particular. This is why he always wanted somebody by his side. In case he wanted to samadhi, he wanted, especially Baburam, Swami Atmajnananda. One time he broke his tooth. When we see his photograph, we see a little cracked tooth, and the other is when he broke his arm. He was walking along the embankment, there was a railing there, and somehow he started thinking of this Jagannath Puri and wanted to embrace the image and fell down and broke his arm. And he took that as a sign. And he said, this is from the Gospel, from February 24th, 1884, he said to M, "Since my arm was injured, a deep change has come over me. I now delight only in the Nada Leela." So this will be this Leela in human form, the human manifestation of God. Nitya and Leela. The Nitya is the indivisible Satchidananda, and the Leela, or sport, takes various forms, such as the Leela of God, the Leela as the deities, the Leela as man, and the Leela as this universe. The universe is also a manifestation of the divine. Vaishnav Charan. Vaishnav Charan was a leader of one of the sects, Vaishnava sects in that day. Thakur liked him very much. They were very good friends, and he respected him. So he quotes him very often. Vaishnav Charan used to say that one has attained perfect knowledge if one believes in God sporting as man. I wouldn't admit it then, but now I realize that he was right. See how humble Thakur was. He always quotes people. Have you noticed that? That some of his biggest teachings, he'll quote some insignificant person we've never heard of, or he'll say some wandering monk told me this. But he experienced these things. That was the difference. So I realize he was right. It is God alone who is sporting as man. So he said that as if the Divine Mother wanted to tell me, don't see God in ecstasy with eyes closed. Open your eyes, see God manifesting in the world, enacting his play, this Leela in the world. So here we see that Leela is used in different senses, that Brahman can manifest as the personal God, as the different deities, as the visible universe, as all living beings, this Nada Leela, and all with this idea that it's a type of play, that it's not real in any absolute sense, that it's irrational. This is another thing. When Thakur is asked why this world is the way it is, he said, who can say? This is the sport of my mad mother Kali, sometimes he would say. We can't expect it to be very rational. We may say it's a way of saying that we don't know. Actually, Maya is also the same thing. When we say that this manifest universe comes as a result of Maya, that because of Maya, the one appears as the many, is another way of saying we don't know why it happens. We just say because of Maya. Maya is that inscrutable power which makes something happen which can't be explained. If we take that as an explanation, okay. Otherwise, it's kind of a non-explanation. So this is another type. Instead of saying it's all Maya, we say play, this divine Leela. The reason why we don't take this too seriously is that there's no reason behind it. We often hear that Why should God have? God has no need to create anything. God has no desire to create anything. God is perfect. So we have to somehow project some human qualities on God, to turn God into the personal God, and think that God is a little bit whimsical the way we're whimsical that way. Otherwise, we don't have any good way to explain any of these things. So we have this concept of Leela, where God, just out of fun, maybe boredom. We have Taittiriya Upanishad, a very famous section, it occurs in other places also, that Brahman is looking around and doesn't see anything and feels lonely and thinks, Bahusyam, may I become many? As if just out of boredom. Of course, this is all allegorical type of thinking. We can't take it too seriously. It means that we don't know why this creation, how it comes and why it comes or anything. So we have this idea of Nara Leela. This was what Sri Ramakrishna especially liked, to see God manifest in human beings. Especially if we look at the final chapter of his life in Kashipur. We see it very, very pronounced that constantly he was saying, I see God dwelling in everyone. Within every man I see Rama, within every woman I see Sita. And a very beautiful scene where they were all sitting there. Latu was there. Latu Maharaj is sitting there like this. And he says, you see Latu sitting there with his chin on his hand. I see Rama alone is sitting there with his chin on his hand. So like that. And he would say, whether you know it or not, you're all Rama. So this was very pronounced, especially towards the end of his life. And he specifically points to that time when he broke his arm. So from that time onward. So there are two types of Nara Leela. One, seeing God dwelling within all beings. And second is that special manifestation, which we call the avatar, or prophet, or these very special souls that come from time to time that manifest the divinity in a way that other people can't. And that end up being the ones that, of course, we worship and pay our highest respect and reverence to. So from the philosophical point of view, Vedantic point of view, God dwells equally within all beings. From this idea of the avatar, that may be true, but sometimes there's a special manifestation, and there are certain souls that may be born only to serve others without any karmic baggage or anything like that. These are ever perfect and ever free souls. So we have this Nara Leela in both senses, and both have this quality of a play, since it is God who's enacting this play, whether in each and every one of us or just in terms of the avatar. And when the avatar comes, then it's also with the companions. And then we really see how everything seems to be scripted. Everyone has their role to play, and as if really somebody wrote the whole thing out ahead of time. We almost get that feeling. So we see with this idea that it takes the sting out of things a little bit. So as Swamiji said in one place, that we see two puppies playing with each other, and they'll be biting each other, and they'll be squealing, as if they're really hurting each other, but it's all play. Now, this is, of course, when Swamiji was in a very high mood and deeply philosophical. Otherwise, of course, Swamiji saw there's tremendous suffering in the world. And it's not always easy, and it's not always something that we want to write off. Is no, don't take it seriously, it's just a play, everything is fine. Swamiji wasn't like that, of course. We know that he wanted to try to, as far as possible, eliminate suffering in the world. But he could go to that high plane where he would say, yes, it's just a play. It's hard for us to do that, and I don't even recommend it, but anyhow. But I want to concentrate now on this concept of the avatar, this type of Nara Leela. And this is generally, when we talk about contemplation and meditation on the divine play, we're talking about this special manifestation of God as the divine incarnation, or say for the Buddhists, they don't have to think in terms of divine incarnation. Still, they can fix the mind on the life of Buddha. In Christianity, we have a very similar thing with the people who think of all of the incidents in the life of Christ. So it's a very common and very helpful type of thing. Actually, in India, the Vaishnava tradition is really adept at this type of spiritual practice. And we'll see that the whole day, the mind is thinking about the baby Krishna or whatever aspect that they worship Krishna as, the cowherd boy, and feeding and worshiping and doing all that. So the whole life, the whole mind is there in that Leela. We become part of the play. So this is the advantage to all of this. So when we turn to the life of Sri Ramakrishna, we find that everything seems to be prearranged. One nice incident took place when Tarak later became Swami Shivananda. He was there writing things down when Sri Ramakrishna was talking. So Thakur said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I thought I'll take some notes, write down." He says, "No, it's not for you. Someone else already has that role." That meant he knew that M was doing it. So it was like everybody had to play their particular part there. So Narendra, when he came, Thakur recognized him. Rakhal recognized him. Holy Mother, of course. That he himself chose Holy Mother. Of course, Holy Mother chose him. You know that story. That when she was very little, even before she was married 5, they were teasing her, "Which one of these boys do you want to marry?" And she pointed to him, Godai, Ramakrishna. So she actually chose him before he chose her. So this type of recollection, this type of meditation is something that everybody can do. And I really want to emphasize the fact that we don't have to say that Sri Ramakrishna was an avatar. Swamiji was very big on this point. He said, accept him in any way that you like. If we believe that he didn't do a single thing in his whole lifetime that wasn't for the benefit of mankind, that everything he did was to set an example for us, that even if he was an ordinary human being, that he manifested divinity in a way that we've never seen in the world. It's enough. We have in the Yoga Sutras that there's meditation on a holy person. It can be. So we don't have to get hung up on this idea, avatar, not avatar, all of these things, but recognize that to meditate on a spiritual figure like Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother can only be beneficial to us. That this, and Thakur says in one place too, how do we worship God? We don't know too much about this transcendent idea of God. God manifests in human form. If we can worship that or have that as our ideal, that's enough. And if we can love the avatar or Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, that's enough. Otherwise, we say love God. It's very hard for us to know unless there's some personality there, how we go about doing it. Okay, now meditation. We all know what we're supposed to do in meditation, and we all know that we can't do it. That we try to fix our minds on a single point. We repeat the mantra, which we can do. We try to picture the image of our Ishtadevata, chosen ideal, which every once in a while maybe we'll get a little fleeting image of it, and then it'll disappear, and then the mind will go floating someplace else. We try to withdraw the mind from the senses, pratyahara. We can do it to a certain extent. We try to get this ekagrata, this one-pointedness. And we find that one of two things happens. Either the mind gets very restless and starts to wander all over the place, or it gets drowsy and sleepy and bored, and we fall asleep. Or if we don't fall asleep, we just go into this state, it's called laya, this torpor. We just go into this very tamasic type of state. Then we're told, okay, then the answer is abhyasa yoga, that we keep trying. We bring it back, and eventually the mind will get trained, like a dog. You keep pulling on the leash, after a while the dog won't run away. I've been trying this for 50 years. The dog keeps running away. Yeah. So this is a method of allowing the mind to attain one pointedness in a different type of way. There's an interesting conversation in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna where Thakur is trying to explain what he means by this one-pointedness. And he's using Arjuna as his example, practicing archery. He says, at the time of aiming at a bird, Drona asked him, Arjuna, what do you see? Do you see these kings? No, sir. Do you see me? No. Do you see the trees? No. Do you see the bird on the tree? No. What do you see then? Only the eye of the bird. So this is that type of one-pointedness that is the theoretical ideal of meditation, that we want to be able to fix the mind that way. Now, the problem is that if our concentration is only on the eye of the bird, there's every chance that when we lose the eye, we lose the bird also. Yeah. When our focus is so narrow that we don't give scope for it to go anywhere other than just into la-la land, where we're just daydreaming again and doing our grocery list and whatever other things we do in meditation. So this is the problem. And this is why, if we practice it, yeah, right? Yeah, she's even doing her grocery list now, I see. So this is why, when we do this type of meditation on this divine play, that it is very helpful to us because we're focused not on a single point but on a circle. Or if we want to say not on a single point but on a gem with many facets. And if we lose one facet, we don't lose the whole thing. We go to another one. And we give ourselves a little room. You know, there's that illustration of the cow that's tethered to a post. We get that grazing area. And the good thing is that when we chew up all the grass in one area, we simply move to another. But we don't go beyond it. Of course, we can. This isn't so easy. We can also go beyond it with this type of meditation. But this is very helpful that way, that it allows the mind to wander within a certain restricted area, which is what we're trying to do. And we keep our focus. It's not as one-pointed, but it can last longer, and it can have the same intensity of emotion. It won't have the same intensity of concentration or focus, but at least with regard to a devotional attitude, it can be equally, if not better. So rather than getting lost completely, we go from one facet to another facet, and the tendency of the mind to wander becomes an aid to us. That which formerly is looked upon as one of the problems in meditation, that the mind wanders, now it becomes a very positive thing for us. We allow the mind to wander from one association to another so that we remain within the circle of the divine personality. We can come up with endless examples of this type of meditation. Now, you want to switch to meditation on Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Whenever I say Sri Ramakrishna, I mean both of them. I don't look at them as separate. They come together. They're two for one. We can't have one without the other that way. So we sit for meditation. We enter into the chamber of the heart. This is one thing that we're told to do. Now we have different types of meditation. We can see Sri Ramakrishna sitting on a lotus. Why not picture him sitting on his cot in his room in Dakshineshwar? Okay, so entering into the heart means we're entering into his room. We're walking into his room and sitting with him. So there are we alone. Rakal can be there, Narendra can be there, Tara can be there, Baburam, all of the M can be there, all of the disciples can be there. We can look around the room, we can see all the pictures on the wall, we can look in the corner, you know, there's a huge jala, what do they call it? A water pot. And in the corner filled with the Ganges water. Right next to that is where Thakur performed Shodasi Puja of Holy Mother. So we can look at all of these places. Each thing will remind us of something. We get bored, we can walk up to the Panchavati, and we can remember all of Thakur's austerities there. all of the picnics, they used to have picnics there. You know that. And the creepers were so strong that the boys could swing back and forth and play. And so we can think of all of these things. This is all a part of this Leela Dhyana. We're allowing the mind to roam, almost literally. Leave the room and go someplace else. Or we can stay in the room. We can picture Sri Ramakrishna getting up in the morning, clapping his hands, going from picture to picture. Narendra starts to sing. He gets up, he dances, he goes into samadhi. All of these things can be part of this type of Leela Dhyana, this meditation on the divine sport. And we find that it's so enjoyable. And it keeps the mind, as I say, within this limited area. We can say within the Dakshineshwar compound, almost, if we want to think of it in that type of, in those terms. We can see Holy Mother sitting in the Nahabad, meditating in the morning, with a little picture of Sri Ramakrishna, offering flowers and everything there. So there's no end to this type of thing. There was a disciple of Holy Mother by the name of Swami Atmajnanananda. Many of you, I'm sure, know about him. He was famous for writing letters. He was not only a great sadhu, a God-realized soul, but a very poetic letter writer. And the translation of his letters came out in 3 volumes. Now there's 1 volume from Swami Swanandaji called The Go Forward. Do you have that here? Yeah. Yeah, I advise everyone to read these letters. They're fantastic. And he really stressed this idea, this type of meditation. He had a tremendous imagination. He would say, sit and close your eyes, picture the young Godai going out to the mango grove and playing with the friends and so many different things. And he wrote in one letter, I forget who he wrote to, but he said, I just heard about a new game that they play called table tennis. He said, it sounds like a very nice game. Close your eyes and picture yourself playing table tennis with Sri Ramakrishna. Yeah. So he really emphasized this. The other person who emphasized this very much was Mahendranath Gupta. And probably because of its influence, this Swami Atmajnanananda, along with many others, if they came from outside of Calcutta, they would go there to meet the direct disciples who were still alive and to go to Bellarmad in Dakshineshwar. But many went to meet M because they came through the gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. So he also did that. And he said that, and we read this from other people, whenever anybody would go to M, he would say, have you been to Dakshineshwar? That would be almost the first question. And if they said no, he would say go. And this happened with Swami Atmajnananda, and they all went together. He would say, of course, go to Bellarmad and meet the monks and everything, but go to Dakshineshwar, but don't go as a tourist. Don't go and simply sit down and close your eyes also. That you go there and look at every corner of the room, deeply etch within your heart the image of all of these things. Remember what took place in every place, all the incidents that took place in the different areas of the room and outside, so that when you sit for meditation, these things will come back into your mind. So he really emphasized that type of spiritual practice. And then, of course, the Swami Atmajnananda also did that. So what are the advantages? Already we've seen some. One is that this faculty of imagination, which gets us into trouble. It's called sankalpa. When they use this term sankalpa has a positive sense to it, but the negative sense is that there's a little automatic flow of the mind as we start thinking of something and then we start planning and scheming and how we'll get it and this and that. The mind goes off that way. So this power of imagination, which gets us in trouble, becomes our friend. That same power of imagination, because what is meditation but imagination? Huh? We're trying to picture something, only that what we're trying to picture is that reality. It's not just a mental process, but still it's using this faculty of imagination. So Swami Turiyananda used to say, today's imagination is tomorrow's realization. Because we're trying to imagine this relationship between ourselves and God, but we have a relationship. It's not real to us, so we use this faculty of imagination, and then we find out that it is actually real. There's a very nice story in a book called The Mind in Its Control by Swami Atmajnananda. He was the head of the Delhi Center for some time. Do you know about the mongoose and the snake, that story? Some of you. Who doesn't know it? Good. Okay, so I can tell it. There was a man who was walking down the street one day with a basket in his hand, and his friend came and saw him and said, "Where are you going, and why do you have that basket?" And he said, "I'm going to a party, and they'll be drinking at this party. And you know, I have this habit that if I drink too much, I start to see snakes everywhere. And the only thing I can do to get rid of the snakes is have a mongoose. So I'm bringing a mongoose with me." So the man says, "Well, what kind of fool are you? These snakes are imaginary snakes. How can a real mongoose get rid of imaginary snakes?" So then the man opens his basket. It's empty. And he says, you see, I'm not such a fool. My mongoose is also an imaginary mongoose. So this is what Sri Ramakrishna meant by this vidya maya. It's also maya, but it is the type that can remove the thorn. It's also a thorn. It's not real. We're using our imagination, but it will get rid of that ignorance, and what's left is knowledge. So this is the way that we can use our imagination. Second advantage is that we don't have to have such perfect control over the mind, because most of us don't. We may be wonderful devotees. We may have tremendous devotion, but still the mind wanders, and it's not our fault. It's the nature of the mind. We want to blame anybody, blame God. Why did he give us a mind like this? This is the nature of the mind, everybody's mind. It's so curious how people think that everyone else can concentrate their mind in meditation but me. We always have why can't I concentrate my mind? People will ask that question. I said, why can't I concentrate my mind? Everybody's in the same boat with that. So if we think of this as an option to what we read in Patanjali, that idea that, yes, just focus your mind on a single point and get rid of everything else, keep it there long enough, and it'll become dhyana. Long enough, it'll become samadhi. It sounds so easy and simple. So this is a way that we can feel that we're attaining some proficiency in meditation, getting some advantage, without having to have such one-pointedness of mind. Then that other obstacle of the mind getting drowsy and maybe a little boredom, that is completely gone, because we can find this type of meditation so appealing that we look forward to it. This is a very, very important thing. Well, we can reach the point where we're anxious to go to our meditation seat, where we feel that, I'm going back to see Sri Ramakrishna again. You know, all the direct disciples, they used to say, there's one thing we all felt in common. Second, we left his room. All we could think about is, when can we go back again and see him? Now, when can we go back and see him? The second we close our eyes, we enter into his room in our heart, and we're there with him. Of course, we can remember throughout the day. That's also true. But we can get this type of feeling. This is why Sri Ramakrishna made a tremendous statement to the Brahmos, to Keshav, one time. He said, this Radha Krishna episode, okay, I know you don't like all this Vaishnava stuff. I know you don't believe in all of this, Krishna and Radha, that is all make-up stuff. But accept this tremendous longing that Radha had to see Krishna. That'll be enough. And there's the same thing. We can also feel that we'll get to sit with Thakur in his room again. We long for that period of meditation when we can do that. Now, there's an irony to all of this. We're doing this type of meditation because the mind doesn't like to concentrate itself. But if we do enough of this, we'll find that the mind will get quiet. And we may reach a point where we say, okay, Thakur, you've danced enough, you've been singing and dancing and talking enough, go back, sit in your cot, be quiet, sit in meditation, and I'll just sit in front of you and watch you. And then we end up doing what we wanted to do in the very beginning. But we let the mind get a little bit quiet. It's like the bird. The bird has to fly in every direction before it says, okay, now I'll just sit on the mast. And wherever it takes me, I'll go. So there's another very helpful thing that we'll find that we can enter into this state of deeper one-pointed concentration as well. Okay, there are the advantages. Now, what are the fruits of this type of spiritual practice? One, of course, is joy. It's a very joyful thing to feel that we're participating in something that took place that we can't even imagine how much bliss, because Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment of bliss. He was a joyful person. He said even from a young age, I would only be with happy people. If I saw anybody happy, I would run away. So he was always full of joy. So we also get to experience some of that. And we get to feel that our chosen ideal is living. That even though I keep mentioning, that it's imagination, we feel it to be something real, because it's the play of that divine consciousness within, which is the ultimate reality. So Thakur used to say that this Chinmoy Sham Chinmoy Dham, that God himself is the embodiment of consciousness, and the abode is the embodiment of consciousness. So Thakur's room within, Thakur sitting there within, that's a manifestation of Brahman. It's not just a play of the mind, it's also a manifestation of Brahman. So we can feel the reality of the Ishtadevata, the chosen ideal. We can feel that relationship, because we're there together. We're sitting in front of him. We can feel that we're brother and sister disciples of all the direct disciples there. So this feeling of the reality of the Ishtadevata becomes stronger and stronger. And since we identify ourselves with this Chinmoy, with this embodiment of consciousness, because if this type of meditation, we're not just picturing Sri Ramakrishna, we have to picture ourselves. Huh? That means I'm not thinking of myself as this physical being in the room, meditating, sitting on the seat. I'm thinking of myself in terms of this conscious being who's there in this conscious play. So that means identification with his physical body becomes less. And when we break from this type of meditation, we think, oh, where was I? Was I sitting in my meditation room, or was I sitting in Thakur's room? Which one was real? Huh? And we find the other, if we do this type of meditation long enough, the other becomes more real. This is where we live. It's a very interesting concept. Where do we live? Huh? Somebody asks you, where do you live? Is it where the body is or where the mind is? There's a beautiful verse in chapter 12 of Gita that Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that try to fix your mind on me and keep your intellect dwelling within me. And then he says, you'll live in me from here on. There's no doubt about that. So we say we want to live in God. What does it mean? If we think of God constantly, we're living in God. We're thinking of Thakur constantly, we're living with him. So we find that if we're thinking of Sri Ramakrishna and that we're one of his companions, we're not thinking of ourselves in terms of this physical body. That we've reached a different realm. We transport ourselves in time and space. So we're not just taking our minds to the Dakshineshwar, but we're also going back into those 1882 to 1885, those years where M was there and he recorded all of the teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. Then we find also that this type of meditation has a tremendous power to transform us. We hear very often that one of the results of meditation is that we take on the qualities of the object of our meditation. And if the meditation involves more just focusing on name and form, then there's not too much of that transformation. If the meditation is including the personality, and it's including all of these divine qualities. And when we meditate on Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, we're meditating on that tremendous love that they had, that compassion, that tenderness. Then we acquire these ourselves. So this is also something that is very helpful to acquire these divine attributes. This is one of the paradoxes of spiritual life, that the goal and the means become the same. We say that in order to have some type of realization, we have to have these divine qualities. But we get these after realization automatically. So the same things we're trying to get. We want to see God in everyone, so we have to do that as a practice. We want to have calmness. We do that as a practice. So this is a way that we can expect, of course, to have that same type of pure, selfless love for God that Thakur had, but it becomes a spiritual practice, and it becomes something that gets transferred to us a little bit. The more that we can think about these things. Then, this is also very important, there's a tremendous carryover quality to this type of meditation. So that if we really feel that, the last hour, where was I? I was sitting with Thakur. The rest of the day, we'll remember it. We'll be thinking about it. That we'll think, when can I go back? And how fantastic it was. As if I really heard him singing these songs and really saw him dancing. If people with a good imagination, this is a good type of meditation for them. So it has that type of carryover, that just as those who really sat in Thakur's room when they left, how they would feel elevated for days on end afterwards till they went back again. We can also have that feeling to a certain extent. Now, Leela Chintana, this reflection on this divine play, this is just the follow-up of this. If we do this type of meditation, then we find two things. One, automatically, the rest of the day with this carryover is going on. The second thing is that if we want to be able to do it in meditation, we have to consciously try to remember the divine play throughout the day, in times when we're not meditating. So we have different ways of doing this. And this is what Thakur calls smarana manana, sharan manan, that he emphasizes this very much. Many people will say that, I can't meditate. What can I do? He said, it's enough if you practice constant recollection, that we try to keep that throughout the day. So we'll find that these two things are mutually helpful, that a little intensity in our meditation will carry over, and thinking about this divine sport throughout the day will help us in our meditation. I want to mention two things specifically that I find helpful for this type of spiritual practice. And the first is spiritual reading, and specifically the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, Kathamrita, and Leela Prasanga, the great master, Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, and the Gospel of Holy Mother. Of course, other things. I like to read all of these reminiscences and biographies of the direct disciples, that type of literature. Upanishad, Gita, these are all fantastic and very helpful. But for this type of spiritual practice, the personal touch, and that which when we sit we'll remember, will come into the mind, these things are very, very helpful. I have personal favorite, of course, is the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. But before I get to that, let me mention the second thing, and that is pilgrimage. Sri Ramakrishna doesn't talk about it very much because he himself was the greatest place of pilgrimage. Anybody wanted to go someplace, he said, okay, you can go, but where will you go? And others will say, you'll find everything here. Where will you go? Any place else. But for us, at least once in everybody's lifetime, I would say go to Dakshineshwar, Jardambati, Kamarpukur, Bellarmat. You know, this Swami Atmajnanananda, he used to call this the Char Dham. Char Dham, we think of the four holy places of India. Some people will say that it means Kedarnath and Badrinath, and some people will say Rameshwaram. But he used to say Jardambati, Kamarpukur, Dakshineshwar, Bellarmat, that these are the four holy places for us. I was very fortunate, I feel, in that I went to Dakshineshwar before I read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Now, I knew, it's not like I didn't know where I was going. I had read a book on Swami Vivekananda with a long introduction, so I knew the whole story. I knew how Thakur touched Swamiji there, and I knew all about it, but I hadn't read the Gospel yet. So when I started to read the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, I knew exactly what it meant. Thakur's on the small cot, he's facing north, where everybody was sitting. I could picture and place everything. So that's why I think these two things together are very important. It becomes very real for us. Anyhow, when I came back from my second trip from India, at that time I was a hopeless case. I was a real devotee at that point. I didn't care for anything else. I was in graduate school going through the motions. I wasn't very seriously in graduate school. I was going basically so I could learn Bengali and Sanskrit, mostly to read the gospel and everything. But I became addicted to this gospel. And I had read in the gospel, Sri Ramakrishna says in one place that at sunset one should set aside all work and only think of God. So I made it a point that I won't do any schoolwork or anything. I'll do all my work during the day. And then night would come, and I would sit for meditation. I would have a little dinner, and I used to read the gospel at least an hour every night. I couldn't put it down. And I had the small version. So every few weeks I went through it. Then I had to get the big one. And I kept going through it over and over and over again. And what I found was a really fantastic thing, that as soon as the sun would go down, my room would change into Thakur's room. I would feel that, the dumpy little apartment in West Philadelphia. And yet, when it gets dark there and I close my eyes, I would feel that I was there. All the result of spending so much time with him. We may say, well, you're not spending time with him, you're reading about him. But no, the beauty of the gospel is not just in his teachings. This is why M was such a genius, how he recorded each and every little thing, even the phase of the moon and the Ganges flowing northward or southward, and every little thing, who was in the room with him, what time of day, so we can really picture everything, so we feel that we're there. And you could say escapism, but we enter into a different realm. So if people would say, well, where do you live? I would say, I live in Dakshineshwar. And they say, what's the date? I say, well, now it's 1883. Something, yeah. So I know from personal experience that there's great joy in getting immersed, and this book is really such an M. We can never stop thanking him for that gift that he gave us with the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. Really, it's something that has to be read over and over and over again. Should be read every day. This is my conviction. It can be read a little bit before we sit for meditation, then we can think about that, or whenever we get time, or at a very fixed time. Our center now, we read it every morning after breakfast, and I've been reading it before I go to sleep every night for I don't know how long. Yeah, since I first started too many years ago. So these two things, I would say, very helpful. If at least once in our life we can go there, we can see all of these places. So when we read the gospel, when we sit for meditation, we really can picture everything very clearly in our minds. Yeah, so even now, whenever I go to Calcutta, of course, I always make sure that I'll go to Dakshineshwar and sit there and everything. It really, the first time I went, this was back in 1972. You walk into that room and there's something powerful about it. Yeah, you feel like you're just in a different world. That is not, you're not standing on this earth. And anyhow, this I think is very important for everyone. How many people have been there, Dakshineshwar? How many people haven't? Okay, go. Yeah. Really, these the Vaishnavas, they have some very nice ideas. They have this idea that this play of Sri Krishna with the gopis is eternally going on. I also feel that this play of Sri Ramakrishna and his disciples and everything is eternally going on. We just have to tap into it. And we do it, yes, we sit in meditation, we read, and we're there again. Okay, coming to an end. You know this Baba Ram Das, who just passed away very recently. He wrote a book in 1971, very, very influential for Westerners especially, called Be Here Now. And it was all about this idea, live in the present, don't daydream, don't let the mind wander, don't think about the past, be here now. And very, very helpful for many people. Today's message is the opposite, be there then. For the devotee, not to say that there's anything wrong with this and be here now, but this be there then. Let the mind dwell in the past. Daydream. All the things we're told not to do. Don't daydream. No, this is a good type of daydream. Feel that we're living back in those golden years. Those golden years, the Dakshineshwar years, where Sri Ramakrishna was there. So that we really feel that this is our home. Like the maidservant. Yeah, I'm working here, but I have my home in the village. That's my real home. And when we rise from meditation, we can feel that, yes, I really was there. This was the time of communion. That not just sitting there and imagining that this is the time of communion. We actually got to go there. We got to spend some time with our chosen ideal. So this is a type of meditation. It may not be for everyone. People may prefer, some people, this infinite absolute reality. There's also tremendous joy that can come from that for people who can do it. But those who like this devotional side, I think you'll find this, many of you do it, of course, but there's a special type of joy, and it adds a very special dimension to our spiritual life and our spiritual power with this practice of meditation and contemplation on the divine play. So, thank you.
So everybody is welcome to ask questions. It's a Q&A session right now.
Swamiji, can you give some information regarding Mahatma, Bhagavan, Avatar? Is it the difference or is it the same?
They all have some technical meaning to them that will be slightly different. The avatar, of course, is a big, big topic. We can distinguish between Mahatma, the great soul. Anyone can be a great soul. The idea with the avatar is that this is someone who takes human birth not because of any past karma, someone who on some level is identified with Bhagavan. Bhagavan will be personal God. Some level is identified depending on how orthodox and traditional we want to be. We may say that the avatar Bhagavan himself takes human birth. God comes in human form, God descends. This is avatar. God descends in human form. Or there's a very nice explanation we find, which I personally like, in the introduction to the great master, the Swami Atmajnanananda. He explains the avatar in terms of what he calls the Atikaraka Purusha. There's someone with a special qualification, special mission, that some souls only take human birth when there's some special need, and not because of any past karma, not in order to attain realization, that they are nitya siddha, they are ever perfect. And it may be historical circumstances, as in Gita we read because of dharma and adharma. It may be just, Sri Ramakrishna says, to teach devotion, they'll take human birth. But they are not born the way others are born because of past karma, pararabdha karma, or anything like that. And They have a capacity for spiritual practice that ordinary people don't have, a capacity for spiritual realization that others don't have, a capacity to transfer spirituality with a touch or with a glance that others don't have, a capacity to absorb even the karma of others, which ordinary people don't have. So on some level, it's a question of degree. On another level, it's a question of an absolute distinction, that they're born not because of past karma, but in terms of spiritual capacity, the degree to which they have that spirituality is so much greater that we recognize them as belonging to a different class. Now there'll be an in-between class, the Ishvara Kotis. These will be the companions that come along with the avatar. And Sri Ramakrishna designated 6 of them, 5 as the direct disciples, and 1 householder disciple. And then other direct disciples he called Nitya Siddha, that they didn't necessarily come with the avatar each time, but they also didn't come because they had to attain perfection. They were already perfect souls. These are all technical things. We don't have to bother too much about them. The idea of Bhagavan, this is what in English we would have to simply call the personal God. This is a concept of God that's not the same as our absolute Brahman, which is beyond all personality, but some concept of God as hearing our prayers and having love and compassion. It can be explained in Vedantic terms as God dwelling within the heart, what they call the Antaryaman, and not dwelling in some heaven necessarily far away, listening to our prayers as the inner guide. This concept of the Sakshin, the witness, the higher self within, from devotional point of view, is the personal God dwelling within the heart. So we find in Gita, even the term Ishvara is used. The Ishvara dwelling within the heart of all makes us go round and round. So we'll have that idea. So Bhagavan will be the personal God. Avatara will be the human manifestation of the personal God or some special manifestation. And Mahatma can be any great soul. There's nothing very specific about it. The Theosophical Society made a big deal about these Mahatmas dwelling in different lokas and everything. I don't know much about all of that. But in our Vedantic tradition, we don't give much technical meaning to this term Mahatma. Yes, Rama.
Can I ask a question?
Huh?
Swamiji, this is about the meditation technique that you taught us today. So when we think about the Lord's Leela, you said that's one way of kind of preventing the wandering mind. But it's the thought I have about why we sit to meditate to realize our Ishtadevata or goal is that the mind should become ultimately without waves and without thought. And the idea of single-pointed meditation is that at some point, when all those thoughts and waves go away, and you're focusing on the Ishtadevata, that at one point even that thought would go and you would go beyond thoughts and you would then... So when you do the kind of meditation that you're talking about, it's still a lot of realm of different waves of thoughts.
Yes. Now, we like to think that we can transcend the mind and reach that realm where there's no perfect quietude, perfect thoughtlessness. Sri Ramakrishna explained it slightly differently. He talks about pure mind. He doesn't talk so much about this empty mind or no mind or destruction of the mind. We find these terms in Vedanta. There's manonasha. This is one of the concepts we have. He thinks of it more in terms either of the purified mind or mind going up to a higher level. So very often people will say, we can't realize God through this mind. He'll say, no, we can't realize God through this ordinary mind. But can reach higher and higher levels. Now, this type of meditation, devotional meditation, where there are, of course, mental waves, vrittis, all of that is true. This also can lead to that disappearing. This is what Sri Ramakrishna meant when he said that through our devotion, we can turn the portions of the ocean into blocks of ice. But when the sun of knowledge comes, that will also melt. So through this type of meditation, if we get so concentrated on the chosen ideal that even that will disappear, the mind goes to a higher level. This is also a way, because Sri Ramakrishna says that all spiritual paths lead to oneness, even the devotional path. So this can also have us transcend that and to reach that state of oneness also. But it's not doing it directly as if we try to really make the mind perfectly still. But it's very difficult to do that. And even that, it's not that we're making the mind empty, it's disappearing into that point. It becomes so one-pointed, it's virtually empty. But if it were just empty, then deep sleep would give its realization. Yeah. So it's got to be more. It has to be fully awakened mind somehow, but not a dispersed mind.
Hi, Swami. So Thakur is here. Thakur is in Kamarpukur. Thakur is in my house. But why do we feel so much intensity, and we long for that intensity when we make these pilgrimages? When I come here in the morning or when I go to Kamarpukur, why does he not feel the same everywhere? So much stronger here or somewhere where he's physically been.
I don't know how much is objective and how much is subjective. We may say that some is objective, that there is a special power in these places. It may be more that because when we go there, we realize I'm sitting on the same ground that he stood on when he went into samadhi. So that'll be more psychological in terms of my devotional attitude and everything. That'll be more subjective than objective, but there'll be a little bit of each. Those who really advance in spiritual life, they'll have that same feeling, and it'll probably be even more real for them, feeling the Thakur or divine presence within the heart. But in terms of divine associations, whether it's a manifestation or not, that's more objective. Association, more psychological. We know that these events actually took place. It gives a certain level of reality to it. Almost all of our shrines in India and in the West also, they'll have some relics. Now we think about relics. What is it about a relic? By relic, generally you mean a little piece of bone or hair or something like that actually belonged to Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother, or a little cloth that Swamiji had, or a piece of his hair, something like that. We can say objectively that hair is no different from anybody else's hair, but we know it came from his head. And bone is bone. It's all burned up and everything, it's half ash, but we know it was his bone. And just the thought of that we can touch something, it can be touched to our head, that actually was part of the body of this divine soul that came in that form. That there's something very special about that. You remember, I think it was Ramlal, one of them, somebody said, let's go, there's a holy man. And he said, why will we go? Just to see a cage of flesh and bone. And was it Vaishnav Chand? And one of them, he got very, who was it? Krishna Kishore. He got very angry. And he said, the body of a sadhu, you're saying, like anything else, it's a very sacred thing. So we can have this feeling of physical objects being sacred through association, and places being sacred through association. The direct disciples had a very strong sense of this. They really felt the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, not just in Dakshineshwar, even in Bellarmut, even at some of our different centers in India. They would tell these young brahmacharis, you sweep the grounds very carefully, Thakur walks here. And it wasn't imagination with them. They felt it, maybe they saw it even, that in some subtle form that he actually would be present there. But there's something that the human mind, that attracts the human mind when it's tangible, when it's something that we can feel and we can touch, and we know that there's some historical connection even. See, we go to Sri Ramakrishna's room, the floor has been changed a couple of times. It doesn't matter. There's the same space, divine space that he lived in for all of the years. So much ecstasy that took place there. So how much of it is objective vibrations and that I can't say, but subjectively I know that going there, that it feels so real, and the memory is there, and we know so much about what took place there, even the words that he spoke, that it gives us some special inspiration that we may not get in other places. We get it to a certain extent, of course, wherever we are. In the home, if we have our own shrine, the more deeply we do our spiritual practice, the more that gets a holy atmosphere also. So we have to build up a holy atmosphere also that way. And then, of course, we want to have it present within us at all times.
Thank you, Maharaj. My question is that modern world, when we are all working for survival, this divine play or Leela, what I understood is that it's mostly Bhakti Yoga and Dhyana Yoga. What is the role of Karma Yoga here? And of course, some Jnana Yoga we need here. But how do we implement in day-to-day life where we have to survive? For survival, we have to work in the world, in the material world.
Yeah. Of course, Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga go hand in hand. Not necessarily with this idea of Leela, but if we have this idea that we're doing everything as an offering, right? We don't want to offer anything that we've done half-heartedly or this is not done nicely, so we want to be very careful that we do everything with great care and attention. We have to be more particular than people who don't have a spiritual ideal. Some people think, spiritual people, the mind is always on something else. They just want to get their work done. If we want to do it as an offering, we have to really practice this. The other thing is that when we're doing our work, this idea of that divine presence within and this divine play going on recedes to the background but doesn't disappear. It's just like our japa. If we get in the practice of repeating the mantra throughout the day, as soon as we get a phone call, we talk to somebody, it stops, but it goes beneath the surface. As soon as we hang up the phone, then it'll start coming back again. So this becomes a kind of background to the whole life. And the perfect example really is the maidservant in the rich man's house. Throughout the whole day, it's not that she's thinking about her children and her house the whole day in the village, but she never forgets. She always knows that that's there, that that's her real house, that at the end of the week or the end of the day, she'll get to go back there. So that won't prohibit her from doing all of her duties and doing everything that she has to do to serve the master and clean the house and serve the children and everything, but it'll be always there in the background. She won't forget that. And that'll be the thing that is a real sense of attachment and identification. So Karma Yoga can fit in with this, of course, because if it gives us the feeling of the reality and the divine presence of God within, then we feel that, yes, let me do everything to please Sri Ramakrishna. Let me do everything to please Holy Mother, as if everything I'm doing is for their sake and an offering to them. So it will help us that way also. It shouldn't be a hindrance. It should never be, none of our spiritual attitudes should ever hinder our ability to work efficiently in the world and to perform our duties. We have to look upon all of that as part of our spiritual practice and worship. The Swamiji, of course, was so particular about that no distinction between secular and sacred. All the work is sacred, all work is worship. Hi, Bill.
Okay. Well, I sit at the back of the chapel, and I've noticed that many people have the tendency to fall asleep when they're trying to meditate. And I have the same problem. So, what can we do to prevent that?
I have a very strong cup of tea in the morning. I'm serious. I'm 100% serious. I'm not recommending it, but I'm saying, yeah. Part of the problem is that meditation, I think, becomes mechanical, and we think of it in terms of something mental. If we really think of our meditation, that I don't want to say time and space travel, but if we really give that the element of reality, yes, this is the time when I'm face to face with God, when I have that opportunity, then it gives it an element of importance and specialty and everything that may be helpful for us. The other thing is that, to be perfectly honest, meditation is for young people. It really is. We get older, and the mind, we think the more we practice, the greater power of concentration we'll have, but the mind is also like the body, that it also doesn't have the same vigor. So that's why they always recommend intense spiritual practice at a young age. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he gives us this out. He says, yes, the meditation is difficult, you become sleepy and everything, then practice this constant recollection. That means that anything that we do, if we sit for meditation, we get drowsy, then go to YouTube, listen to one of the talks, read some spiritual thing. Yeah, some people naturally have this tendency to fall asleep. It's something that really has to be caught in the beginning, the very beginning of when we start our meditative life. Otherwise, it becomes habitual, becomes a real problem. Other times, we have to make sure we get enough sleep. Sometimes we're sleep deprived. Yeah, we don't realize it. Yeah, but through willpower alone, we can solve the problem a little bit. But most of it's not completely, that we have to have some other aid. Or maybe we don't sit so long for meditation, or we give ourselves a chance to do other things. Many of our swamis will say that when people say that my mind gets lazy or I can't concentrate, they say, then open your eyes and look at the picture of Sri Ramakrishna or Holy Mother, repeat your japa. It's not, of course, the highest ideal of meditation, but better than falling asleep. That at least the mind is getting concentrated on the chosen ideal. It's not within the heart that way, but this is one option, to do something like that. You know, when Latu Maharaj, when Sri Ramakrishna scolded him, and he said, "You fellow, what are you doing sleeping at this time of night?" It was probably something like 8 o'clock at night. Everyone's supposed to be meditating. He was sleeping. He got a big scolding. He said, "If you sleep at nighttime like this, when will you do your meditation?" So he decided he'll never sleep at night anymore. But he said in the beginning it was a terrible struggle for him. And he would sit and would nod off, and he would get up, and he would slap himself, and he would throw cold water in his face, and he would sit and try again. And he said after a few days he could do it. And the whole rest of his life, he never slept at night. He would meditate all night long or do japa all night long. Others, even all the other direct disciples, they would be sleeping. He would be lying on his back, covered with a blanket, and doing his meditation the whole night long. One time, they heard the tick, 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 tick. They thought maybe there's a mouse or a rat in the room or something. They turned the light and it stopped. Then they turned the light off again, tick, 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 tick. And then they saw this Latu Maharaj just there, pretending to be asleep, but inside doing his japa, like that. So part of course, we don't have that type of self-control and willpower to do that. But it was, even for him, it was a great struggle to do it. Yeah, as we get older, and hopefully we get some devotion, we don't have to worry too much about this concentrating the mind in meditation. If we feel some devotion, and the mind can dwell on this divine play, we don't have to worry too much about it. If we find ourselves falling asleep, then do something else, that's all.
Swamiji, the direct disciples, we think that they came, that they were ever perfect and they come with all the incarnations all the time. So why they had to go through all these hard austerities?
Not just them, Sri Ramakrishna. Nobody did anything compared to what he did. That 12 years of the sadhana, he said, for 6 years, I hardly ate anything and sleep left me completely. And how the whole night he would spend weeping and praying to the Divine Mother. His eyes would be bloodshot and red. He would roll on the ground. We don't have another example of anybody doing anything like that. The direct disciples also, the tremendous austerities that they practiced, meditation, the ones who had realization easiest, they did the most. So we look at Swami Brahmananda. He did so much of meditation all day long in the little hut in Vrindavan and other places. And Vijay Krishna Goswami, who was earlier the Brahma Samaj, later became a holy man on his own, he asked Swami Brahmananda, he said, Thakur gave you everything. You had the highest realization from him. Why spend so much time in spiritual practice and meditation and everything? He said, it's true. What Thakur gave me was everything, but I want to make it my own. I want to become established in it. So this is one thing. The other thing is they came, just as Sri Ramakrishna did, to set an example for us. If we didn't see them doing this type of spiritual practice, then we wouldn't feel inspired to do it ourselves. Now there was a bit of a break between two groups of Sri Ramakrishna's disciples after he passed away. One was mostly Ram and Girish and other householders, and the other was Narendra and the other monks. That Ram especially was very critical. He said, you're doing so much of austerities and spiritual practice. Don't you know that the avatar came? When the avatar comes, there's no need to do anything. You've already attained everything through his grace. And then the other said, no, he told us that you have to do hard spiritual disciplines. You have to realize God through your spiritual practice. And of course, we give more credence to them, to Swamiji and the direct disciples, that they understood that having some illumination through the divine touch is one thing, and getting it through our own earning it ourselves through our own spiritual practice is another. How and why Sri Ramakrishna had such tremendous longing to realize God through other paths after his realization of Mother Kali is a bit of a mystery. We don't find this in any other divine incarnation or holy person, where they had the highest illumination, and then again this tremendous longing to do it in other spiritual paths. The closest thing I can think of is the life of Ramana Maharshi. It's very interesting. We only know, or most people know, that one day he was probably 16 or 17, that he had the tremendous fear of death came over him. And he said, oh, what really does it mean to die? And he laid down and he tried to picture the body dying and the senses not functioning, and his mind was going higher and higher and higher, and he had that realization, I'm not the body or the mind, the senses, I don't die even if the body dies. So we say, oh, he had his illumination. But after that, he practiced intense austerities. Living in the basement of the temple and his body being almost eaten up by the maggots and other things there. Very, very intense. So we see this sometimes. Thakur said that, generally you have the flower and then the fruit comes. Some of these great souls, the fruits come first, then the flower. So the opposite, they have their realization, then after that they do all this spiritual practice. Otherwise they didn't have to, it's true. They had the highest realization. And they were born perfect. The other thing is, Thakur says, anybody who's born divine incarnation, then when the avatar takes the human body, he takes all of the qualities of the human body and mind. He behaves just like an ordinary human being, of course, with essential differences, but the same pleasure and pain, the same physical body aches and things like that. He always said that, look, even Rama wept for Sita. So the divine incarnation comes, or this Nitya Siddhas come, they'll still come with a little veil of Maya and this longing to have this highest realization. And afterwards they may realize, yes, that I came as a companion. That we have this whole issue. Thakur says when Narendra, when he knows who he is, he'll refuse to live in this body. What did he mean? Some people will say that he had that realization that he was the eternal companion of Sri Ramakrishna, Nitya Siddha, that he came along with him. Not simply that he didn't know that I am one with the Brahman, all of that. So they also have a little veil of Maya, and they also have the attributes of a human being with the same body and mind that we have, only their capacity for spiritual realization and love and compassion is off the charts compared to us.